Okay, hi. I want to talk about Hume's problem of induction today, and it's an important concept, important problem to know about to really understand a lot of the literature in epistemology and philosophy of science. And it's pretty interesting, and it has a lot of relevance, at least for how we justify science today. So most of this is in the Treatise of Human Nature, book 1, part 3, section 1. Most of it's there or later in the book, but that's where most of this stuff comes from. So Hume has a notion of a cause, and it's pretty close to what you probably have as a intuition of what a cause is. It's something that has an effect, that causes an effect. And you can pause this video and read this, all these 8 conditions if you want to, but really I don't think there's any damage in just assuming that the idea you have of a cause is what Hume is talking about here. So just like Locke, this is important to get out of the way really quickly to kind of understand his reasonings. Hume argues that there's only one way we get ideas in the mind, and that's through experience, through sensation, through all of our senses. And that's how we can take our sensations and form them into beliefs and imagination. And we can do stuff with them afterwards, but essentially the bare materials of our experience are just gotten in from the senses. So our first little term here is demonstrative reason. So that's just basically, it's just a relation, and Hume talks about numerous relations, and he doesn't see them all as being justified in the same way. And causation is one of these relations, and we can kind of draw a contrast between 2 relations here. So mathematical proportion is the easiest to think about. So 1 + 1 = 2. That is demonstratively true. It can't help but to be true. There's only one outcome of that. There's no other explanation for what 1 + 1 is. It's 2. With a matter of causation, Hume kind of turns to wonder about what kind of reasoning can causation support. Is it justified relation, just like 1 + 1, or is it something else? So Hume comes to conclude that causes are not demonstrable at all, which is something that's kind of hard to think about because we think we understand cause as being clearly true. We can see, one ball running into another ball, and we can say that that ball caused an effect, i.e. the other ball moving. But Hume famously argues that it's not a justified belief. So we should be worried about this. So and there is some things he concedes that we are sure about causes. So they have to come, an effect has to come after the cause, obviously. If that wasn't the case, everything could be coexistent, as he says here. So if everything was cotemporary, everything would be coexistent, which it's not. Things come, things go. We have this intuitive idea of this kind of flux. And nothing in the senses can give us an idea of a cause. There's nothing in a billiard ball running into another billiard ball. There's no cause between the 2. It's just 2 objects, and there's these 2, they are occurring one after the other. The one ball is hitting the other ball, and the other ball moving succeeds that event. That's all we have, and that's not enough for a demonstration in Hume's account. And the only things that we can be sure of are these relations that I kind of glossed over earlier: resemblance, proportion, and quantity and number, degree of inequality, and contrariety. So these are relations that we can demonstrate. 1 + 1 is 2. That's a demonstration. Causal relations are aren't justified in the same way. They're not demonstratively justifiable. So Hume also has this idea of necessary connection, which is related to demonstration. So it's just the notion that it couldn't be otherwise. So necessary connection, there's a necessary connection between 1 plus 1 equaling 2. There's only one outcome to that problem, and it's 2. And reason is the only way we get to necessary connection. So a way that Locke tries to solve this is that, he claims that there's powers in objects. So there's powers in objects to move other objects. And he tries to get us out of this problem where we don't really have the sensation of causation readily available to us. So this still doesn't work, because as Locke and Hume both agree, the only things that we can have as ideas in our minds are things we get in from sensation. And Hume's going to go on to say, well, you don't have any idea of causation. You can't get any sensation of causation from experience. It's not there. We can't be sure of it. It's just not worth even talking about at this point. So kind of a quote here. So all ideas are derived from and represent impressions. We never have any impression that contains any power or efficacy. So not just causation, we don't have this idea of, we don't have an impression of power or efficacy. So we have no idea of power. So why are we talking about this? Hume's wondering. So where, if anywhere, is this idea of necessary connection? Well, it's in our minds. So we have this idea of necessary connection from demonstrative reasoning, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2. And we kind of unjustifiably apply this to matters of causation. So as Hume says, so thus as necessity lies only in the act of understanding, by which we considered and compared the ideas, in like manner the necessity or power which unites causes and effects lies in the determination of the mind to pass from one to the other. So we're kind of just glossing over the fact that we don't have any experience of this. And further, previous events have no connection to new causes that are happening now. What does the ball 1 colliding with ball 2 have to do with anything in the future? Well, it doesn't really. There's a number of further problems with that, namely that how can we be sure that any future instance is going to exactly resemble this instance? What are the requirements that are more important than the other ones? That's a whole nother problem, but it turns out we can't justifiably believe that things that have happened in the past will produce like events in the future. It's not a demonstration, it's merely force of habit, Hume would say. So to kind of get at why having all ideas originate from the senses is a problem for the problem of induction, we kind of have to dig down here. So if we think about what distinguishes sensation from memory and imagination, well, that's just that memory and imagination are what we do with sensation after we get it into our minds. So we see a lion, we see a green apple. Our imagination can make the formation of a green lion, even though we haven't experienced it, and yet everything is still given into us from the senses. So here's the crux of the problem. Sense data does not communicate any information of causation. We've already said that, but if this is true, and we interpret the cause of a familiar event with the idea that it has always been observed to coincide with another thing, that's a leap. So when we say that that's going to happen again in the future, we're leaping from the current example or past examples into the future, and that is just not justified. We don't know that to be the case. How do you know that the stock prices will go down if this happens? Well, you don't, because you have no experience of what actually caused that, because all ideas are a matter of experience. And if you didn't experience the cause, it just seems clear that you can't experience the cause in that matter. You can't make a demonstration of it. It can't be a logically tight relation that we can be sure of. And further, we can form habits through repeated exposures, but that doesn't make induction work any better, because at rock bottom, it's unjustified. So if something is unjustified, In one case, it's going to be 1,000 times later, even though you can kind of be certain that, when one ball hits another ball, the other ball will move. So this brings us to the idea of powers, and this is kind of how Locke and other philosophers have tried to get out of this sticky problem. It's to say that, ball A has the power to move ball B when it's moving in a like manner, make it move this amount of distance. But this is unjustified in this exact same way as causality. This is just kicking the ball down the road further, no pun intended. So here's kind of how it works. So from Hume, the past production implies a power to move, say. The power implies a new production, and the new production is what we infer from the power in the past production. So from this idea that this object has the capability of doing something, we think that it has the future capability of doing something, which we don't get this idea from the senses again. We don't get this idea of the power of an object, which we can't see, we can't feel, we can't touch, we can't smell, anything like that. We don't have any idea of it. It's just something in our minds that we think is true. So here's where the inductive leap really gets off. So you start to infer from current past events to future events, which is unjustified. So the way that these causative beliefs get formed, so like I said, beliefs are just there. We can have beliefs about things, but it's only given from the raw materials of sense experience. And we can have beliefs about certain other things after the fact, but all of our ideas are given in from the senses. And then we can have these beliefs, and we could have beliefs about causation in much the same way. So the way this kind of works, and this is kind of an abstract idea. So this is kind of how the idea of a causation is formed. So this is how induction kind of works. You see, a body of water, see a specific lake, and you see a couple men drown in it, see 5 people drown in it, 10. You start to form this belief that not just this lake, any large body of water has the power to make a person drown. So this is not in reference to any specific lake, although going around this specific lake again would probably make you think that it has the power to drown people. But you're going to extrapolate that back into second order beliefs and start to think that, well, gee, what is it about this particular lake that's making people drown? Well, it's probably the 30-foot deep water supply, and that's probably it. So from then on out, you see any 30+ foot deep water supply, you're going to think, oh, this can drown me or other people. So Hume, knows that induction works, that science works. That's why he's kind of asking these questions. He's just kind of perplexed about why it seems that it's unjustified. But there's 2 ways that probability really work. You can have something like you don't understand the cause of it, so you can't really know if it's probable or if it's certain and certainly determined in some way. So like lightning strikes, those are going to be probable events. Then like something like dice rolling, there seems to be a priori chance that a certain face, a 1 in 6 chance, a certain face is going to come up, even though you don't actually know which one it's going to be. The cause is related to that. You throwing it rolling a certain amount, and then a certain face coming up. So some people have tried, I won't get into too much depth here, to solve Hume's problem by saying that, well, we can make a demonstrative argument of induction because there's this thing called the uniformity principle. So the way Hume puts it, if reason determined us, it would proceed upon the principle that instances of which we had no experience must resemble those of which we have had experience, and that the course of nature continues always uniformly the same. So if we take this as a premise that it's just going to be the case that this happens, it's just going to be the case that things that have happened are going to happen again. If that's a premise, we can reason with demonstrative reasoning to a conclusion that is going to be true. It's just going to be probably true, but it's going to be at least justified. Some people have said, that we can't really do this because this is kind of begging the question. We're assuming what we're trying to prove, and what we're trying to prove is that things that happened in the past have some relation to what's going to happen in the future. That's a very generalized way to put it, but so that's one of the solutions. Another solution is you can just accept that there's no demonstrative reasoning for induction, but it does work, and that's not what is going to ultimately justify it. Could be induction, even though that would be circular. Maybe it's something else, but you can deny that demonstrative reasoning can get to synthetic reasoning. That's a bit more complex than I'd like to talk about in this video, but that's going to be for another video. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to be talking about how Popper handles the problem of induction next. And this is going to be a good baseline to kind of get a sense of what the problem is and see how Popper addresses it in a moderately unique way. Okay, thanks for tuning in.